Greetings, my fellows. Double check. Kind of thinking about military fleets and like the thought process on Star Citizen because essentially my last couple days of thought made me get the urge to buy multiples of a ship in order to instantaneously have like a really solid fleet at the start of Star Citizen. And I don't want to spend that much on the game, so I think I'm just going to recycle some money and buy some Endeavors. So for my fleet personally, I'm going to try and get 3 Endeavors, and then I'm going to keep that Banu Merchantman that I had, and that's going to give me the ability to have a hospital, satellite, and a collider with my Banu Merchantman to help it sell goods, and that will be my capital fleet. But starting the game, I'm starting to think about what that means and how you can build up from nothing. So looking at what I want to build, because there's also systems in Star Citizen that are like only large ships can get in or only medium ships can get in, etc., etc. So there's places for different sizes fleets. But I'm wanting like my end game for just a large fleet isn't really to have like a battleship group, it's to have a landing force. So for the capital fleet, I'd probably try to get like 4 Perseus or something at some point. But for the large fleet, I'm gonna have 1 Carrack, and then potentially I would love to have 2 Carracks, but 1 Carrack would be enough for 1 ground force. 2 Carracks would be the best option. So I'm gonna try and I'm gonna keep my original Carracks that I backed with on the game. And then when the game comes out, I'm gonna try and get a second Carrack at some point or find somebody that has a second Carrack. Then essentially I'm gonna want 1 Liberator. So your Carrack and your Liberator, you can use them together. I guess you could technically, I don't know. Basically, my thought process is that you can put a PCs on the Carrack or the Liberator, fly one of those ships out to where you want to go, and then fly the PCs back to the Liberator or the Carrack, and then fly the other ship with you. So even as one person or a small group of people, you can easily pilot both of those ships. And then on that, I want 2 Redeemers, 1 Eclipse, 6 arrows, potentially an anti-air ground vehicle, and then like PCs and Argo ships on there, or a Terrapin. And what that does is the Carrack's going to be able to do exploration missions. It can dock to the Liberator, so it'd be 1 full, ship. And then let's say that you have just enough people to man the Carrack. Let's say you have 6 people on the Carrack. You can crew the Carrack with 4 and crew the Liberator with 2. You fly out to wherever you want to go, and then you're going to have 6 players that could arm all 6 arrows. Or you could have, somebody in the Eclipse, 5 arrows. You would have enough people to pilot a Redeemer. So you could take a Redeemer out, and then if it gets damaged or something, swap it out to the other Redeemer. You could have 4 people take a Redeemer out and then call in an Eclipse. You could take 4 people, take a Redeemer out and call in 2 arrows. There's a number of combinations that you can have, but essentially that's a special operations like task force that we're building there. It's going to be able to do like police missions and bunker runs and stuff. But with this, there's a number of options because if you don't like the Redeemer, you could go for Connie's. or anything that you want to set on that. And the Connies will have more flexibility with like, 2 additional aircraft, everything else. But then at any point here, after getting like the basic attack group, I'm gonna try and get 1 Crucible and 1 Starfarer. And that essentially lets me land on a planet and deploy the Liberator and the Carrack, the Crucible and the Starfarer, and you have all of your repair functions, which we don't know what all the Carrack can repair, but I would assume that the Carrack can repair like basic equipment, and it's going to be able to repair basic components and stuff like small components. So you're looking at like your PCs, your rovers, all that kind of stuff. And then the Crucible is going to be able to repair your Redeemer ships, your Carrack, all your other ships that are on the ground. That's basically the idea. And then the next phase would be to buy 2 additional Liberators. And then after you buy the 2 additional Liberators, essentially the second Liberator would be more focused on ground troops. So that's going to be like your anti-air ships or whatever, and then the other Liberator would be more of your airships. Okay? And ideally, you would expand your forces a little bit before this happens. Maybe you start getting some NPCs to help you on your ships. Then you could have, one of your crew members go and pilot the other Liberator, and and you're still at 6 people right now. So as long as the AI stuff works, you could still stay at 6 people. But now you have the ability to land on a surface, use all kinds of ground vehicles that you want, all kinds of air vehicles that you want, repair, and everything else. So if you have a Starfarer, Crucible, a Carrack, and then 2 Liberators, you're looking at 5 people for captains, and then a bunch of AI. But you can still pilot and crew every ship that you would have there. Okay. But on top of the second Liberator, I would probably either do 2 Connies or like a Valkyrie and a Connie. Or you could drop an Eclipse and take 2 Connies and a Valkyrie. But essentially, you want to use, with only 6 people, I'd probably go Connies. But if you ended up having a lot more, I could easily see going with like a Valkyrie. But essentially, 2 Connies is going to take up a similar amount of space as 1 Valkyrie. The main difference is that the Valkyrie is going to be more armored, because you're going to get twice as many vehicles with the Connie, being able to carry those in, but you don't have jump seats. But the difference is that the Valkyrie has like 20 jump seats and like 5 beds. And then you can have a rover in there, which can have like another 6 players. So you're looking at like 31, 32 people. The Connie has all of its turrets and stuff that it mans. But then you're going to have, I think, 5 beds. And then you'll have the back snub fighter. So that's already 6. Then a rover in the bay would be in another 6. And then you have all the other room that you could, like the couch and stuff that people eat on and stuff in there. If 5 people can sit there, you could potentially get like another 5. But you're probably at least going to have 12 people potentially that you could drop off with a vehicle inside of that thing, which is pretty good. Um, for all y'all that haven't really like kept up with the last stuff, is basically in my mind the Redeemers are Apache helicopters. The Carracks, or not the Carracks, the Connies are Black Hawk helicopters sort of, and then the Valkyries are more like the Chinooks. Um, that works out in my head like pretty decently. But essentially, how it would work is that if you have a Valkyrie, you would escort it with two Redeemers to make sure it's safe when it lands. And then if you fly your Connies or whatever, like you do stuff solo, but you could also escort those with Apaches. Or you could drop all your stuff at the same time and whatever. But essentially, if your group grows any bigger than six, you're going to be able to carry a number of players in with the Valkyrie or the Connies and escort them with your Black Ops to make sure that they're safe for the most part. And you'll probably have like smaller things like the Argo cargos or the PCs to kind of transport people around. But starting off the game, I'd probably do a starter ship and then try to get to like maybe a Terrapin, and then from a Terrapin to a Connie, and then I would probably try to get a second Connie, because then you'd be able to have, if you have if you have a group of six and you have two Connies, then essentially you can have a pilot and two gunners. And then, the Connie isn't going to be the craziest combat ship in the world anyway. So if you're using it on a planet's surface, you could probably use just one turret gunner, like on the bottom or whatnot, for the most part. So then you'll have one engineer. But you'll be able to carry two ground vehicles with that, which means you could go two rock miners, or you could do a rock miner and a rover, kind of use them in tandem, or you could have one vehicle and one ship, like you'd have a rock miner and one ship and use the other one for cargo. And then those two would stick around with you, until you end up getting your Carrack and stuff. So potentially what you could do as well is instead of getting two Redeemers early, you could get two Carracks or two Connies and then get a Valkyrie or whatever afterwards. But I'm thinking that's the kind of plan I would do, is like, because if you could get three Liberators, essentially the third Liberator is going to be an aircraft carrier that will hold a ton of planes and stuff. But if you get to that point, you can have two Redeemers, or you could have four Redeemers. So you'd have a Valkyrie on one Liberator, and then you would have four Redeemers and two um, Connies, and then you'd have probably one Eclipse. And that would give you the ability to drop and move three vehicles at a time and have two escorts for those each time. And then you would also have the ability to hit with size 9 torpedoes with an Eclipse, even though that you could have it, but basically that would be your main package for a ground force. But when you're in space, you would need escort ships. So at that point, you would need like probably like a Retaliator, maybe some Perseus or Nautilus would probably be the top contenders that I can think of. And those would escort your ships to the planet's surface. But then, where are those ships coming from? And that's where my merchantmen and stuff comes in, is because those are, if I have enough people to man the merchantmen and stuff, the idea is that it's going to be a floating kind of space station city. So there's a couple of options here. Ideally, I think that you only really need two endeavors for the merchantman, because it has a double docking collar on the bottom. So as long as the merchantmen can connect to the Endeavors, you're going to be able to have at least two of them and the Banu merchantmen together, which is a quite a lot of space, you know. And then for like military stuff or like searching for things, you'd have the telescope array on one and you'd probably have the hospital on the other. And then if you're gonna like be making equipment and stuff, you could have a collider essentially on one of the Endeavors. But I think two Endeavors is pretty good for a merchantman for the most part. Um, but if you do three Endeavors, you can hold an Apollo, which you could basically deploy to a planet's surface to help out with medical stuff. The problem is that the Apollo has six medical beds, not particularly well suited for like long duration missions, I would think. It's more of like a you drop it in and you pick up wounded and then you bring them to the hospital kind of thing. But also because the Carrack has a medical bed on board, if you have one or two Carracks, I mean, you could basically heal up most small units. You don't really need a giant, like, you don't need an Apollo unless you're having, like, a spaceship crash or something. And this is where I'm kind of like a little bit split because essentially I want three Endeavors because you can get three hangar bays. And the Banu Merchantman needs defenders. So, like the Banu Defenders. And you could store those in those hangar bays. But the Banu Defender is flexible enough to where you could still use it for small missions, fighting missions, escort missions, box missions, and I'm thinking you could use it for transportation because it has an interior, and you could use it for medical because you can put people on the interior and fly them back to the medical ship. So if you have three Endeavors, it's not exactly a city because you don't have food and whatnot, but your Banu merchantmen can basically connect to some of them or set in the same space. The Banu defenders are essentially transportation. So they're going to be able to even if the boating docks and stuff, like even if the Endeavors don't dock to the merchantmen and whatnot, you can use the defenders to fly from one to the other and just land inside. Okay. So that would probably be the biggest benefit. And then we know that the Banu defenders are supposed to work with the merchantmen, so the merchantmen should be able to fuel the Banu defender. So as long as you have gas, you should be able to fill it up and keep using it. And I think the merchantman will be perfectly fine doing that with its fuel scoop, probably, as long as that's how that works. Um, but I think ideally, if you have three, you would have an Apollo in one of them, and then you'd have Banu defenders in the other zones. And then what you would have is one set up as a hospital, one set up as a telescope array, and then one set up as a collider. And essentially, the merchantmen, you're going to be selling goods to players and NPCs. The Banu defenders will be able to go out and collect people and bring them back to the hospital for medical, or go and do box missions or whatever else that they want to do, and then bring like bunker. Let's say they go do bunker runs. They bring back armor and guns to the Banu merchantmen, and then you can use the collider to like increase the specs of the weapons and stuff and make them better. And then you'd be able to deploy the Apollo and the Banu defenders as like a fleet to get to locations that you send your ships to go find things at. So your telescope array or whatever would go and show you oh, this is a point of interest. Okay. And then you send your Carrack out. They go and find it. They go through a jump gate, whatever they have to do to get there. And then you send the Carrack back with your landing fleet or one carrier, so you have some support aircraft to kind of scout out the area, take over the planet or whatever. And then if anything happens majorly, you would send in your medical stuff to kind of land down and help out and bring them back to the merchantman. But I think with those three endeavors, even though you don't have food production and such, so it's not a full-blown city, as long as you have three, you could like drop the collider and use it for food production if you wanted to. So you can either do military aspects where you have a medical hospital and a telescope to help you find things out in the universe, or you can do a medical hospital and the collider, which will let you buy and sell things on the merchantman a little bit better. And then you have that spare one that's kind of floating around. But starting out, I think the Connies are kind of important because you have gunboat groups. So you go from a starter ship, get a Connie, and then you would work towards getting probably 4 to 6 Connies. So that would be like your helicopter team. So if you have 6 people and you have 6 Connies, then you have plenty there. And then basically you probably do 4 Connies and then you do a Liberator. Because 4 Connies is going to give you 4 ground vehicles. You'd be able to, basically it would give you 2 Connies and then 2 backup Connies. And then you get a Liberator. Yeah, okay. We're gonna redo this video from the first here.